you know, the nervous system, so this unit, we're kind of around control, communication, and we just spent a few hours talking about chemical communication. The other mechanism of communication is via electrical signals. And that's kind of where we want to spend the next couple lectures talking about is this kind of electrical flow of information. To do that, we're going to have an understanding of some basic electrical principles, and we'll talk about those here in just a second. But as far as the organization is considered, right? If you remember, the nervous system is organized into like a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. We could probably put in here also the ENS, the enteric nervous system, but that is specific only for the digestive system, so we won't worry about that right now. But the central nervous system was the brain and the spinal cord. The significance of that is where integration occurs, right? In our flow of communication, we have an afferent sensory pathway, right? And then we have integration. Then we have an efferent motor pathway. The integration occurs within the central nervous system. If it's very quick, crude integration, it's in the spinal cord. Things like knee-jerk reflexes and stuff like that you're thinking about, somatic reflexes in the body, are integrated in the spinal cord. But anything that requires interpretation has to go to the brain. So we have a lot of integration. Most integration occurs in the brain. Anything that is attached to the central nervous system is considered the peripheral nervous system. The organs of the peripheral nervous system are nerves. Some of these nerves are afferent, carrying sensory information toward the CNS. Some of them are efferent, carrying motor away. Most nerves actually are mixed, but there are fibers in there, or cells in there, that are afferent and axons in there that are efferent. If we're looking at the motor branch, right, there are two distinguishingly different branches there. There's somatic motor output, and the effectors it controls are skeletal muscles. And these are the things you have voluntary control over, right? If it is autonomic motor output, its effectors are glands, like endocrine or exocrine glands, and smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. These you don't have voluntary control over. It's this autonomic branch that's going to work with the endocrine branch to give us homeostasis, right, with the endocrine system. Right, do you have any endocrine control over that's analogous to somatic? Do you have any, this way, do you have any voluntary endocrine control? Can you say, okay, go ahead and try. Try to make yourself secrete more glucagon.
Oops.
Oops, yeah. Yeah, you don't, right? So endocrine is kind of all autonomic. And the reason is because what controls the endocrine system is your hypothalamus. And your hypothalamus is regulated by your autonomic nervous system. So the two branches of the autonomic nervous system that we're going to spend some time talking about are these antagonistic branches here, parasympathetic and sympathetic. For the most part, parasympathetic is associated with a decline or a depression or an inhibition, okay? Lowering things, stopping things. The sympathetic branch is associated with an increase, right? Excitation, enhancement, more of something. So between these two, we can do that homeostatic regulation also. If we're too high, we'll use parasympathetic to bring us back down. If we're too low, we'll use sympathetic to bring us back up. So this is kind of the general organization of that. And what we're going to talk about initially are general features of the nervous system, just with how do nervous system cells generate and propagate electrical signals. That's question number one. And then question number two is how does that work within the context of somatic versus autonomic? And then how does that work within the context of parasympathetic versus sympathetic? So we'll get the general principles out of the way first that apply to everything, and we'll see how things are a little bit different whether you're looking at these two or these two. Okay? Now remember, nervous system The organs are combinations of tissues, but the tissue that gives them this property of electrical control and communication is nervous tissue. And nervous tissue has cells in it, obviously. Two types of cells, neurons and glial cells, or neuroglial cells. We classify neurons based upon their function. They're either sensory, motor, or interneurons, or some books call them association neurons, I can't recall. But sensory neurons carry information toward the CNS, so they're afferent. Motor neurons carry information away from the CNS, so they're efferent. And interneurons, or association neurons, are entirely contained within the CNS. Okay? So they are entirely in the brain or entirely in the spinal cord. Then we also saw that we could classify things based upon the structure of the neurons. If you recall, the neuron has a cell body, and there are fibrous projections that come off of that cell body. If there is a single projection that comes off, we call it unipolar. If there are two projections that come off, we call it bipolar. And if there are numerous projections that come off, we call it multipolar. Sensory neurons, almost all of them are unipolar. There are some examples of bipolar ones that are in the retina, but most of them are unipolar. Motor neurons and all interneurons are multipolar. And the multipolar neuron structure, right, if you recall, was one something like this, where we had one long projection and numerous shorter projections. And the shorter projections were called dendrites, and they receive information, right? So they receive the information this way. There's the cell body. And the one long projection transmits information there, and that's the axon. So numerous dendrites receive information. The neuron cell body integrates the information. The single axon transmits a signal to the next cell. That next cell may be another neuron, or that next cell may be an effector. Okay, you all right with that? Now,